when you think of heart leadership, so the very ideal of heart leadership is really about connection. It is truly about the power of connecting with another individual through meaningful and authentic relationship. A lot of leaders don't listen. They think they know the answer and they tell the people the answer before they've even had a chance to listen.
How do you describe to a normal everyday person what you do today in the world of leadership?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I say to individuals is, as you know, Brandon, leadership is truly a journey. And you will always hear me say that anybody has the opportunity to be a leader. And I will always tell people leadership is never a title. And so when I look back on, when I started my career to where I am today, what has always stood foundational for me is that leaders who lead with their heart and leaders who don't truly abuse the title that is truly a blessing to be given and bestowed upon a leader really are the ones that transform lives. And so for me, I think, in fact, if you would talk to anyone that has ever served on any of the teams that I have led, what you would hear is that first and foremost, I'm a human. And I really, truly take that notion very important. Mm-hmm. The most important thing I can do is to demonstrate human-centered qualities through leadership each and every day.
That's great. It's a problem when we have to explain that we're a human, right? But it's very necessary at the same time because we come from a not so distant past where people were, and sometimes even in today's world, are seen as a number and they're seen as a cog in the system. And we as leaders, we have the choice, especially those who haven't seen leadership growing up in their family dynamic or who haven't had a great leader at their job. And then they move into a company and now they're bestowed with the title of leader. They might think of that as simply a manager of these people or cogs in the system, right? So this idea that we are human, this idea that we are leading with heart, which I love that concept. And I want to ask you about that. It shouldn't be an alien thing, but in today's world, it still can be that way. Do you think that we've made progress in the direction of leading with heart in the past few years? Or do you think that things have changed even more drastically in the opposite direction? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it's actually unfortunately gotten worse in many ways. And I think if you look at, obviously the industries that I have interacted the most with and have the privilege of serving, if you look at healthcare, you can look at the crisis of the workforce, particularly among our nurses, but also our doctors, and frankly, all levels of healthcare. And you can see that it's clear culture, but also leadership have just not demonstrated true human-centered aspects of what it means to lead. We would not be in a place where you have more strikes among union nurses, more departures, resignations, individuals completely leaving healthcare if we were moving in the right direction. And I think in many ways, what we have to do is there's some encouragement. I'm certainly encouraged that more and more healthcare systems have brought on chief learning officers, certainly more, have brought on chief diversity and health equity officers. But there's still a lot more work to do. And I think if we get to the basics, what we have to do is understand what it means to connect with one another and understand what it means when we need to change things together within culture.
That idea of connecting with one another and the idea of leading with heart, is that something that we're born with, or is it something that can be taught to everybody or some people? Like, how do you train one to lead with heart? And maybe a good place to start is, what does it mean to lead with heart?
Yeah. So, I think just like the argument and the long-standing debate of is everyone a leader, I do believe that when you think of heart leadership, so the very ideal of heart leadership is really about connection. It is truly about the power of connecting with another individual through meaningful and authentic relationship. And when you're a leader, what's even more critical within that is you are privileged and given an opportunity of the highest regard, regardless of title, to lead others and be focused on advancing a mission, vision, and values. And so within that work, what's so critical is that you find the way to connect with one another, because we don't move individually, we move together. I think, to your point, though, what's critical is that, heart leadership is really not all just about connection. It's also about empathy. It's really that idea where we're going to empathize with one another. We're going to take the time to listen intentionally, actively listen, which you'll hear me say regularly, that listening, we know, is both a skill and I always say it's an art and a science, because you got to really think about it very holistically. And a lot of leaders, I often will say, leadership starts with an L for a reason, and that's listen. Mm-hmm. A lot of leaders don't listen. They think they know the answer, and they tell the people the answer before they've even had a chance to listen. And so the other piece that's really critical about that is the coaching, the empowering aspect. Someone that leads with heart knows that there's a greater cause, and it's not about me, it's about we. And they understand that at all times we are in this truly together. And so do I believe people can be born with it? Absolutely. Do I believe we need to continually be trained on it? 100%. Every leader, every professional, because again, everyone can be a leader. I tell nurses all the time, I have this debate when I've been a professor. My nursing students will say, I'm not a leader. I don't have the title of leadership. Well, right there tells me something is wrong within the culture that they serve in. Wow. Because if they respond and say, I'm not a leader, I don't have the title, someone there is making it clear it's a hierarchical structure. And I've served in healthcare, very hierarchical. That's not a good culture. Yes, we need to have structure, but hierarchical creates this dichotomy where it can create this us versus them dichotomy. And that really is, in many ways, what has really challenged leadership for so long. And so what's critical in that, to your earlier question, is the power of connection. A leader should want to be a coach. A leader should want to empower. And a leader should do everything within the leadership that they have to want to lift up each and everyone that's around them.
Wow, that was beautifully said. Everything that you just said there, I really, really like that. And I agree with it wholeheartedly. And whenever I hear something that sounds as great as that, the next question I always love to ask is, okay, how do we get there? So one point that I really loved is when you're speaking with nurses as an example, and you talk about how they're a leader, and they say, no, Jeffrey, I'm not a leader. And you say, okay, well, that's an immediate red flag of the culture. I completely agree. Would you then say that as soon as someone is brought on as a hire, that person, in order to be the most efficient and really in order to make the biggest difference, that person should, in a way, assume and feel as though they are a leader in that organization, even without the title? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you exactly why, because with leadership comes ownership. So it's exactly how I was onboarded early in my career into healthcare from my leaders, from my executive leadership team. Was, again, when you start with the premise, whether clinical or non-clinical, that we all have the opportunity to lead, you start with the strong proponent element of we're going to own this. And so irregardless, we have a mission, vision, values. We have a strategic priority as an organization. And if I'm bought into that, I'm going to help advance that at all levels. And so when I've talked with nursing students and others that have said, I'm not a leader, I've always said to them, well, help me understand this. Do you not transform care through the delivery of the care that you provide? Do you not lead the transitions of care with the patients that you take care of? Do you not help the family members that you're talking to about the patients that you're taking care of understand the process and understand what's going to happen within all that work? And they always say, oh, yeah. I said, and you're not involved in infection control and infection prevention, and you're not involved in new initiatives around the healthcare system? And they look at you and they say, oh, no, I am. And I said, well, guess what? You're leading. And what's interesting about it is when you go to curriculum in a lot of our nursing education, even medical education, and other industries as well, I think in many ways we have we focused for a long time on leadership as the title, even though we all know that it shouldn't be. It is still, or at least most of us know. Some still obviously think that it is truly all about the title. Some still really prescribe to that. And so what I've said to even the academics in the world is we've got to really change that culture. We've got to really help everyone understand that it is truly about how they contribute that truly can be leadership. And I'll give you an example. Early in my career, there were a lot of initiatives that I was asked to take on, didn't have the title of a leader. But guess what? It was through those initiatives that earned me the opportunity to have that promotion and have that title. But what didn't change for me once that happened was who I was and the work that I was doing. What really changed was I now had another community of influence to help make sure the work that we were doing was getting done. And then I took it upon myself because at that time I was the youngest leader promoted in the organization in history. And I saw that as not only a blessing, but also an honor, but also a challenge. Because I had to I had to really gain support from others who were doubting me. But what I learned through that was I also had to be the leader that would be viewed differently. I had to spend a lot of time with my team to make sure they understood how could I help them. And that's where I learned early on that leadership is truly a blessing and a gift. And if you leverage what we all know leadership can do, you really can change lives, both professionally and personally.
So you've done a lot of really cool things in this world of leadership and personal growth, and you're super young. So how did this come to be about? You could have chosen to be anything, but you decided, I'm going to help leaders become better. I'm going to help teams become more engaged. Like, how did this happen for you?
Yeah, well, so I'm the organizational girl, the developing leadership girl. I planted my first church when I was in college, and my ex-husband and I, we grew that to, a few hundred volunteers. And what happened then is I saw what happens when you align people around a vision. When people have a vision, have a mission that matters, something happens, something so powerful happens. And so that really taught me, everything I needed to know about the importance of mission, about the power of vision, about how to develop leaders, how to give people something to be a part of that's bigger than themselves. And so, now I work with churches, I work with mission-driven business owners, entrepreneurs, and I love it. So that's kind of how I got started. And so here we are today. I say I work with mission-driven organizations who have a mission that matters. If we don't have a mission that matters, if you don't have a mission that matters, if your organization has no purpose, then, we don't really care if it shuts down, and we don't need you to lead. But if you have a vision, if you have a mission that matters and you want to make, yes, an impact, but or yes, a profit, but more than that, an impact, then I want to help you get all of your entire team aligned around a vision so that we can mobilize it, so that we can see it come to pass.
That's super cool. So you're a very religious person, which I love. And I love talking to religious people on the broadcast. You asked me before we even went live if this is something that we can talk about. And I'm like, absolutely. I'm not a specific denomination, but like I told you, I am a spiritual person. I do believe in God. I was just never brought to church. Like as a young kid, I was brought to church. But, it was like when I was really young and I found it as something that I didn't really want to be there necessarily. Anyways, I never continued going. So I'm curious, what you've learned when aligning people around a vision in the spiritual and religious world, is it the same or similar to what you help organizations do? And like this spirituality of yours, like how did that begin? I know that's a loaded question, so I'll let you kind of bring it where you like.
So here's how I answer that. So I grew up Catholic. So my dad is Irish. So, it kind of comes with the territory. So it's 7 brothers and sisters. And so, I got, water baptized as a baby. I had my first communion, went through confirmation, and I believed in God, but I did not have a relationship with him. I would not say that my family was religious. I would say we were a good family, the typical American family, right? We went to church on Christmas and Easter, and, we prayed the Lord's Prayer at dinner. But when I was in college, I really started to want to know what my purpose was. I remember praying this prayer in my sorority house. I said, God, if you're real, make yourself real to me. And so that began my journey of having this real relationship with God. And over the years, what I have found is it doesn't really matter if people go to church or not. We think of church as the four walls. One of the things I said at the LA Style Magazine Award ceremony is I said, God is looking for distribution channels. He has a thing that he wants to accomplish on the earth. He has practical things that he wants to do in people's lives, and he has spiritual needs that he wants to meet. And, when we look at Jesus, Ben, there's all of his miracles, 138 actually out of 140 were done in the marketplace. So Jesus wasn't telling people to come to church. He was going to them. And what was Jesus doing? He was turning water into wine. That was his first miracle. He was healing the sick. He was caring for the poor. He was feeding the poor. He was meeting people's actual needs. He was, in a sense, empowering organizations, leaders to accomplish a mission. And then when they were ready, he was saying, okay, let me introduce you to the kingdom. Let me introduce you to the creator. Let me introduce you to what it means to have a relationship with God. And so, you just wonder, why did everybody love him so much? Except for the religious leaders, they didn't love Jesus. And so, that's why, Ben, I'm so passionate about serving leaders, lifting their arms, helping them execute their vision. And that's why I don't want to just work for the church or in the church or with pastors. I think pastors and churches are a distribution channel for what God wants to do. I don't think that they're the only. I don't think that they're the most important. I don't think that they're the largest. I think that mission-driven business owners, CEOs, Christian, non-Christian, have an important work that, yes, God is empowering them to do. And so I want to come along, business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs that are serving people, loving people, because I believe that's what Jesus would be doing. And then, yes, if and when they're ready and they're open, I want to introduce them to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, because I know what it did in my life. I know what he has done in my life. But that's not always where we start, Ben. And so I love being the leadership girl, the organizational girl. I want to motivate people. I want to get them around a vision. I say this, Ben, and I apologize for all you pastors and Christians that are listening. I will die a slow, terrible death if I have to hang around just Christians the whole rest of my life. like that's not my jam. Like, I don't want to be in the church. I want to be in the world. Like, I want to be around people, all different types of people. I want to help them. I want to serve them. That's why I speak at all different events and conferences. And, I talk about leadership because I want to help. I want to serve. And then, yes, ultimately, I want to introduce people into a relationship with Jesus Christ, but it's not going to happen by inviting people to church only. It's going to happen by serving people, meeting them where they're at. Yeah. And so that's where, I'm unapologetic. I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. I want to help you know God. But I want to serve you. I want to help you when I speak to at your conference, when I come into your organization. I'm coming to serve. I'm coming to help you accomplish your vision and your mission, no matter what that is.
I'm really glad that you said it like that, because a lot of times when we get, we've had pastors on the show, we've had a lot of stuff like that. And you saying that these works are happening outside of the church and those four walls is super important. And you remind me a lot of my friend Tisha, who I'm eventually going to have on the show. She's a great person. Tisha Mahaley is her full name, who she is also very religious. And that's like a more recent thing in her life over the last 5 to 10 years. And she is involved in her community. She's involved with the bank that she works with. She's involved with her own coaching practice. And her whole mission is, I want to help other people to achieve their goals and be where they want. Because I think it was Zig Ziglar who said, if you help other people achieve their dreams, then your dreams will come true. Yes. So it's not even necessarily the principles of a specific denomination, but it's the principles of being a great, decent human being that we're talking about right now. And if you want to take your organization from where it is to where you want it to be, then it comes down to the foundation of being a great human being who wants to see other people succeed. And I think we've all worked for leaders, and maybe I'm using that word loosely. Maybe I should say we've worked for bosses at one point or another, who didn't necessarily want to see us achieve our goals. They were looking at bottom line. This is where we need to be. Maybe they didn't even want to do their job, right? And maybe it's because they didn't receive training. Maybe it's because they were just thrown into that role. They didn't want it, but they were asked to do it and they did. So there's a big difference between a boss and a leader. Yes. What would you say is the biggest difference between someone who is a leader and someone who is just a boss?
Great question. A leader has a mission. A leader has somewhere they're taking people. A boss manages people. That's what a boss does. A boss tells people what to do, and you can be a good boss. You can be a boss that, gets the job done. But a leader inspires people. A leader has a vision. A leader is able to say, come follow me. I'm going to make you something. I'm going to develop you into something. That's why the greatest organizations have, yes, a mission and a vision for what they want to do for their customers, for their clients, but they have a vision for the kind of culture they want to create in their organization and their company. They have a vision for how they want to develop the leaders that are on their team. So the difference between a boss and a leader is, yes, a boss gets things done, but a leader takes people somewhere.
So let's talk about that idea of a vision then, because that's a very, very big difference that separates those two words. When it comes to a vision, and let's say you're a new leader, okay, or an existing, it doesn't matter, but let's say you're a new leader and you're asking, okay, well, what is the vision, right? I feel like all these companies, and including the one that I worked with for many years, we had a mission and a vision statement, and they were different things. And it was like 5 years into my leadership journey with this exact company until we even decided, hey, we should make a vision statement. So we looked up all the other vision statements of all these other companies, and we're trying to craft our own in the same or similar words as like American Airlines and Apple and all these other people. And it's like, why are we basing our vision and mission off of all these other missions? And I was a very, very young leader at the time, so I didn't necessarily call it out. But like, is a vision simply something that you just create on the fly just to have it listed and posted somewhere on a wall? Like, how do you then create or find the vision and mission for the organization?
It's so true, Ben. Most people have a vision that's like on the wall, that's in a handbook, right? Most people have that. That's what they have. So I always say, does the mission of your organization live on a wall? Does it live in a handbook, or does it live in the hearts and the lives of your people? And Brennan, it's so, so important. It's so important. It's not enough to have a vision and a mission on a piece of paper. It's just not enough. It's not going to get the job done, right? Mm-hmm. We have to wake up each and every single day so passionate. I cannot tell you how many leaders, I cannot tell you how many people I say, what is the vision and mission of your organization? And they're like, no. Why do you get up each and every single day? Why should your people get up each and every single day? Why should they work for you? There's a lot of organizations they could work for. Why your organization? And Brennan, it's just mind-boggling to me. 80% of the workforce is disengaged. 1 out of every 5 employees are miserable. Of course they are. We were not created to just work 9 to 5 to clock in and clock out. We were designed to move. We were designed to accomplish something. We were designed to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And if you as a leader do not give some people, do not give your team, do not give an organization something to be a part of that's bigger, that matters, then you need to quit. You need to not lead. You need to go stop putting yourself in a position of influencing people. If you are a leader, it is irresponsible of you to not have a mission that burns in your heart. You know, when we think about people like Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, Billy Graham, you know, these leaders, these influencers were convinced, were motivated, not only with what could be, but with what should be. And how did they lead these movements? How did Martin Luther King Jr. lead such the movement during the civil rights? Well, he didn't be quiet about his dream. He got up and he said, I have a dream. This is the vision. This is what I see. This is what can happen. And he mobilized an army. He mobilized a people to become a part of something that was bigger than themselves. Billy Graham, right? He led millions and millions and millions of people to Christ all over the world. Why? Because he had good news that he wanted to preach. And he said, I cannot be quiet. I must go. I must tell. I must share. And he was so passionate about it that he fired so many millions of people up all around the world. Mother Teresa, she said, there's poor people in Calcutta that must be fed. And I'm not going to just feed myself. I'm going to go feed them. I'm going to go build a place where people can have their practical needs met. And so we as leaders we must, Brandon, be about this. And we think, oh, well, I just lead a life insurance company. No, you don't. You lead people, you create culture, you change lives. And if your organization isn't changing lives, then what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point, that the whole reason you're there, right? So let's talk about several things that you just mentioned. So that idea of 1 in 5 people on your team are not happy with what they do. I think that goes very deep, and I want to go deep into that in a second here. But first, my question is has it always been this way? Like, has it always been 1 in 5 people? Has it always been 80% of people are disengaged? Or is this something in recent history? And if so, why are people on our teams not happy with where they work? Is it only vision? Is it something else? And like, what sparked this number to continue rising throughout the years based on what you've seen with the people that you work with?
Yeah, well, Gallup did that study and found the percentage of people that are disengaged. And we talk about like the Great Resignation. We are seeing it more and more today. But before employees put in their 2 weeks notice, they quit on the company 20 years ago, right? And so, like, Brendan, like, I don't know all the reasons it's happened and where it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. But what I know is today, people want to be a part of something that matters. The days of the Industrial Revolution where we just clock in and clock out, those days are gone. Our generation, the millennials, the Gen Z, want to be developed. They want to be coached. They want to have a purpose. They want to have a mission. They want to be a part of something. And so that's what I see today, Brennan. I think it's so critical that we engage our employees, that we engage our team, that we develop leaders. Forbes did a study and found that 60% of Gen Z wants to have daily, if not weekly, check-ins from their managers.
Yeah.
And the number one thing that differentiates employees that are engaged and disengaged is their relationship with their boss, is the relationship that they have with their leader, with their manager. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if that manager, if that leader, if that boss will meet with their employees, with their team, and just do these one-on-one meetings and say, I care about you. Here's what we're accomplishing as an organization. Here's what I see you doing that's accomplishing that. Here's how I want to help you grow. Here's how I want to develop you. Then employees will be engaged. They'll accomplish the mission. They'll accomplish the vision. They'll be happy. They'll have purpose. They'll lead more productive lives. And so it is just so critical, Brendan, that we lead in this way.
So talk to me, coming from a perspective of leadership, what's it like retiring after 3 decades of essentially having an identity that is centered around this idea of you being a leader in this industry?
Yeah, the leadership journey is long, but at the end of the day, it felt like a Sunday afternoon, truly. 3 decades, and it's over like that. The last couple of months, I've really been reflecting on every fork in the road, in my leadership journey, especially since I'm continuing to teach leadership and going to run these leadership events. I'm just pulling up all those experiences and anecdotes, and I'm ready to share those with anyone who's willing to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. What drives you, before I congratulate you for the second thing here, what drives you to continue moving forward in this journey of yours when it comes to facilitating trainings and speaking on leadership? A lot of people I know, and someone we actually had on the show recently, I talked to him after the show and I said, so what's next after this? And he said, when I'm retired, I'm not doing any of this anymore. And it actually kind of surprised me. This was coming from this person who I expected who'd be very similar to you. They'd keep moving. And I'm 29, but I'd like to envision that when I am in my 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, and at this point with technology, I'll probably be living to 150. I like to think that I'll still be doing something fun and helpful and educative, such as this platform. So what drives you to keep moving forward even after retiring, which many believe that retiring means stopping?
Right. So, the main driver is there's a deficit of leadership everywhere. You can look around the last couple of years of COVID and so on and so forth, and even in government, you can see it. And, we can reach, 1 person, 10 people, 100 people, that multiplies, right? And I guess number 2, it's really fulfilling, to take someone who's young or has the willingness to learn and mold them into a leader, or give them a positive framework to start their leadership journey. That's what pretty much drives me. I do wake up every day wondering, how can I be a better leader? How can I get just a little bit better? Because as leaders, we're never done. And that's part of the challenge too. Even after 34 years, 4 years in the military and 30 years in oil and gas, I'm not a finished product. Right. And I work on that every day. So those are the two main drivers.
Oh, I love it. Great points. I've got some follow-ups on that too, but I'd like to congratulate you for your second giant achievement in this chapter of your life, which is the release of your first book, which is Lead You, the winning combination to achieve personal and professional success. And for those watching the podcast, you can look on Bobby's shelf to the left of him, or the right of him, but the left for us. And you see the beautiful cover work, and you can clearly see Lead You. So first of all, congratulations on the launch of your book, sir. Very exciting.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
And let me ask you, why are those two words, giant and bold, on the cover of that book? Why is Lead You the two focal point words on that book? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, when I was doing my research for the book, the first place I went was Amazon, and there were 60,000 titles of leadership on Amazon. That, coupled with the fact that along my 34-year journey, I saw a lot of people who wanted to lead others, but they didn't necessarily lead themselves good. So if you're not leading yourself effectively, then you're not leading others effectively. It's impossible. Thirdly, or lastly, I like to work problems from the inside out. Start with the cause and not the symptom. And the cause of poor leadership it always goes back to self, right? You can look at people who have setbacks, which I've had setbacks myself along the way. And, when I really analyzed it, it was me that couldn't get out of my own way. I had to lead myself better, even with all the leadership training and experience I had. So, this is one book in a set of three. The next book is Leading Teams, and I'm going to finish out with Leading Through Change. So I think people sleep on leading through change, which is really important for organizations because, in business, everything today has become disruptive. And so what does that mean? That means that there's a lot of change.
Yes. Well said. I love the 3-part series there. And I feel like all three of them will go very well into each other. You mentioned that you discovered at a certain point in your career the importance of leading yourself. Was that already when you were considered the title of leader? Like, when in your leadership career did you realize that leading yourself was the most important piece of the entire equation?
Well, the first inkling I got was when I played football. And I played football from 7 years old to 19, 1 year in college. And unfortunately, I washed out. But the very specific moment I learned that we have to lead ourselves first is, during boot camp, you're taught leadership training. And in Marine boot camp, they teach leadership a certain way. And the very first thing you learn are character traits. And that's totally down to the individual. And you not only learn it in boot camp, you're expected to perform to that standard or those leadership traits for your whole tour of duty, right? So it becomes a way of living, right?
Are those leadership traits universal, or are they tailored to the individual during that time in boot camp?
They're universal. Yeah. Everyone expected to work to the same character traits. And there's an acronym out there. It's called JJ, Did, Tie, Buckle. And I'll just rattle off a few of them. Justice, judgment, dependability, initiative, decisiveness, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, enthusiasm, and on down the line.
And do they go in that order specifically?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Now, it's a framework. Like I mentioned in the book, it's a very particular framework, and it works. And if you look at the success of the Marine Corps, over 200 years and never lost a battle. And of course, the Marines retreated at some point at points, but never lost a battle. And it goes back to one thing, and it's leadership.
How do they help you to embody those character traits, especially as a young man going into the Marines? how do they help you to understand that these aren't just words or an acronym, but something to live by, especially in the event that you could be facing life or death? Like, how do they get you to embody justice and courage and knowledge, and what goes into that?
Well, that's an awesome question. So first of all, you get direct feedback. And second of all, you're put into situations where you have to use these traits. And that could be training, it could be an operation. Outside of boot camp, you go into the Fleet Marine Corps, and, you go to, it's kind of like in business, you go to a different business unit, right? So, my first duty station was Okinawa. So that's where I went. And we went to the Philippines for 6 months from Okinawa. And the first school they sent me to was jungle environment survival training. So 5 days in the jungle, no food, so on and so forth. And, definitely your resilience and courage and stuff like that, your decisiveness, your bearing, it's easy to get hot and get frustrated, but, you're expected to keep your bearing. So it's going through those situations. And then, finally you see the result, right? When a mission is accomplished, you're like, oh, okay, this actually works. There's a reason, for the last year, I've had to learn these things and go through these hardships. And it's no different, working in the civilian world, sometimes it's a little less organized, but, you do go through different kinds of hardships, in business. And, when you come out of the other side, or you fulfill an aggressive financial business plan, you see the results, and then you'll say, okay, well, yeah, that's why they want us to do it. It works.
Absolutely. So a combination of direct feedback along with being put in the situations where you must practice these different principles.
Absolutely. And, feedback is omnipresent from your peers, from your superiors, and even, subordinates, because everyone's on the same team.
When you're working with a leader and they oversee, let's say, even other leaders, so maybe now we're speaking to, a higher level executive or decision maker, how often, because we're all familiar with the quarterly review. And as a leader, when I was at the higher levels of leadership in the company that I worked with for a decade myself, when I was 18, I started there. I looked forward to my quarterly reviews because I'm very much someone who is pretty self-managed. However, I always liked to know, what are you seeing when it comes to my performance as a leader and in terms of the execution of these different things that I'm working on? And they used to always give me at least one thing that I can work on. And one of my goals was, I'm going to work on that one thing so I can impress them, because I like the recognition, but also to keep improving my game. And for me, though, it got to a point where I was so self-managed and I was in such an isolated position that I only had that conversation with them once a quarter. How often would you say is it important to be checking in with those people that report to you to help them to embody these principles?
Well, definitely it all starts with a standard, right, for everyone, then expectations, and then for, the scene. So if you have a span of control of, say you're an executive, you have a span of control of 5 or 6, first thing you should do is always keep rapport and communication with everyone. And, as far as giving feedback, it should always be given with the intent and tone to improve people. Now, as for the timing, I believe it should be as appropriate to the individual. It's, individuals are on a spectrum, right? So on a 100% scale, you've usually got your 15% of highly effective and performing people. You've got the middle, and then you've got the 10%, at the bottom. And that's just a curve. Some people take more feedback than others, right? And feedback in a different way. And that goes back to, that all goes back to influence. And, people think influence is this magic thing. Well, it's not. The thing about influence is you have to understand people, and that's spending personal time with them, getting to know them, what drives them personally and professionally, and knowing about their culture, their background.
I love that phrase, chin up, chest out. And the phrase, it speaks so true. I mean, so many things happen, especially physiologically in our body, when we have our chin up and chest out. Like, so many people, including myself at times, are walking throughout our day, shoulders hunched, our jaws locked up, right?
It's a stress response. Yeah. And we're more stressed out than ever, right?
Yes. And it's automatic. A lot of us don't even realize that we're experiencing that. And it's just like going to the gym and working out, right? It's muscle memory. The more you do it, the more you remember to do it, the better you become at it and the more automatic it becomes. And if you're reminding yourself of that mantra every single day, when you look in the mirror and you see Kuko, you see that logo, it's like, oh, this is a really good time to pump my chest out and chin up, because even just that slight change in our physiology, that can pump us up for the next part of our day and make us feel completely different. And I remember I was at a leadership conference recently, and it was a public speaking conference. It was 2 days with a group of, I think 13 or 14 leaders. And they were all amazing. And they were just going there to become better communicators and better public speakers. And long story short, one of the gentlemen was his posture he gave a speech the first day, and then everyone gave a speech the second day to see how much they improved. And the first speech, his posture was meek. He seemed timid. He seemed afraid to give the speech. He was a decent communicator, but his body language was all off. So the only advice I gave him was, hey man, next time I want you to have your chin up and your chest out. And I want you to deliver exactly what you did, chin up, chest out.
Boom.
And he's like, okay. And he did that. And literally it was a complete 180 night and day transformation. And his one takeaway from the 2 days, we asked all of them, what was your top takeaway from these 2 days? He said, that advice that you gave, as simple as it was, chin up, chest out, completely transformed my public speaking game. And if it can transform that, imagine every other area of life it can transform as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we're just now tapping into all this research on the effect that your body language has, on your verbal message, but also your confidence, your mindset, and how people perceive you. Your body language, to quote the great American philosopher, Dr. Rob Bell, your body language screams, your voice whispers.
Wow.
Yeah. I might have butchered that quote, Rob. So if you're listening, feel free to correct me, go into the comments on the podcast or whatever, call me out on it. But I think that's his quote. Like, your body language screams and your voice whispers. And it's so true, because people are forming judgments, within, all of our first impressions of someone are made within 7 seconds. I would argue it's even faster.
Yeah.
But you walk in a room, before you open your mouth, people have already made a first impression.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. And what better to wear than clothing? Like, I shouldn't be speaking on that because I'm not wearing any logos today, but why would you wear an Abercrombie logo or an American Eagle logo? That doesn't mean anything, right? When you could be wearing a shirt that actually gives you a mantra that sparks innovation and makes you feel better. Even my license plate is Be Better, right? Because I have Be Better clothing, obviously, but I don't like to wear it every single day. Maybe I should. I just feel cheesy wearing my brand every day. But again, maybe I should. And I wear that, but every time I walk to my car, I see my license plate, and I'm constantly reminded to be better. So it's a great reminder to
I love that. I love that you have that license plate, and I would argue you ought to wear your merch every day. You ought to wear. I love that you have a sign in your studio that's lit up behind you.
Yeah.
It reminds me, Kanye West, another great American philosopher, has a life-sized painting. Like, he commissioned an artist to create this life-sized painting of him that sits above his living room couch. So when you walk in the foyer of his house, it's above his living room couch. And I forget the name of the journalist that interviewed him, but this journalist went in and interviewed him and thought it was the weirdest thing. So at one point in the interview, he asked him, why do you have that? What's this all about? And initially you would think, oh, it's Kanye. That's coming completely from a place of ego. He probably has one of them in every room in his house, right? There it is. And the reason he gave was, he's like, I ought to be my own biggest fan. If I'm not my own biggest fan, I shouldn't expect anyone else to be a fan of mine.
Wow.
So, pretty deep, right? Yes. For a rapper, for Kanye, but it's so true with everything we do. Like, you've got to be the first believer in what you're doing. And if you're not willing to rep your brand, why should anyone else? And I just think that's as crazy as he might be, I think he's crazy like a fox on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great reasons there. And I think that's a really great point. If you can't be your greatest fan, then how can you expect other people to be a fan as well? Especially when we're talking on this context of leadership. I love that. Now, you're the first person I've talked to where you've had a book actually become a screenplay, which I'm assuming that's a movie, right? A
Well,
screenplay.
that sounds way sexier than it really is. But yes.
That's amazing. So it was your book, Seeds of Success.
Yes.
So what's the story behind we could talk about the story of all your books, but this one specifically, what's the story behind Seeds of Success and how was it adapted into a screenplay? How did that all come about?
Great question. So Seeds of Success, the subtitle is A Leader, His Legacy, and the Lessons Learned. And I wrote that book my first book took me probably a year and a half to write. That was the coach approach. I wrote Seeds of Success in maybe 2 weeks in 2013. And it was a book based on my time and what I learned with my coaching mentor. And it's 99. It's like a fable, like a modern business fable type format, story format. So it's really easy to read and, read quickly. And it's one of those books you can read in one sitting. 99% completely factually accurate, 1% a little flavor added, some creative license added for flavor, I guess you could say. But it was about my time with my coaching mentor. I actually started writing it on my way home from his funeral in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was flying home. And what happened was I realized, he was a college lacrosse coach for like 43 years. Probably forgot more about lacrosse than most people would ever learn. Coached and mentored thousands of young men. And what had happened over all that time was, and as a coach, you spend more time at any level, really, probably. You spend more time with other people's kids than you do your own, especially as a college coach. You're with them 20 hours a week at a minimum. And his own children, who are now grown adults, when they were living under his roof, they felt very disconnected from him. He wasn't around a whole lot, and they didn't really understand him and appreciate him for who he was, the way his players and his assistant coaches and staff members did. And so I initially wrote it and I thought to myself, if it doesn't sell a single copy, but I'm able to give it to his widow and their children and, his grandchildren, and they develop a better understanding of their father or grandfather and, come to appreciate who he was a little more and just learn about him and why we all loved him, then it was mission accomplished. And a weird thing happened. That project just sort of took on a life of its own. The book won 3 awards at 3 different book festivals, one of which was his Business Book of the Year at the Hollywood Book Festival. Some of my readers, said this book ought to be a movie. And when I hear that, I take that to heart. I think, if you're not in any business, if you're not listening to your customers, you're not paying attention to your fans and what they say or think, you're kind of out of touch with your own brand. So I got to thinking about that, and having a screenplay written, unless you're a screenwriter, and it's a completely different skill set than author, is expensive. So I started a crowdfunding campaign for that on Kickstarter. Kind of the early days of Kickstarter, before it was a common thing and people just happily pump their credit card number into a project that they wanted to support. So I spent a lot of time going on tour to different cities and just holding live events to promote it. And literally most of my time was spent explaining what Kickstarter is.
Wow.
But my readers raised $33,000 in 30 days to have it adapted to a screenplay. I hired a Hollywood screenwriter, Bob Burris, who's become a close friend of mine, to write the screenplay. And it's kind of how like most movies deviate from the book a bit.
Mm-hmm.
This one certainly deviates from the book quite a bit. It's a little bit more about my career path and journey as a result of what I learned from my mentor. But yeah, it was an exciting project. We've pitched it to a number of production houses and places in Hollywood, and it just seems like unless it's a Marvel movie or a remake or a sequel, of something that was from a generation ago. It's not getting produced, by any of the major producers. So this will probably end up being at some point an independent film project. I need to go. I think the Powerball's at like 500 million or something ridiculous. I need to go buy a Powerball ticket, and then maybe I can afford to become a film producer. They say, Brandon, the fastest way to become a millionaire is to be a billionaire who invests in movie projects.
Wow.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and if you look at, that whole industry is upside down ever since COVID. People just don't go to the theaters as much. But, that always stuck with me like that. All right, you're asking somebody to take a big chance.
Yeah. Well, it could be on a streaming platform, though. That's how we watch most of our movies now. It could be picked up by Netflix, by Hulu, by Peacock, or whoever decides to pick it up. So it doesn't always have to be in a theater. I think that's amazing. And when I look at you and your career, like it just, first of all, I mean, over $30,000 raised in 30 days by your readers is absolutely fantastic. And as a father yourself, as a husband, like the big question I have for you, and I'm going to ask you this, but not yet, is how do you balance all of that and the travel and the fundraising and the authoring and the writing the children's books and Kuko Radio and the clothing and all these things? Like, how do you balance all that? Because if we're talking on the thread of leadership innovation and how to be more innovative as a leader, like you even mentioned when you wrote Seeds of Success, you said, even if I didn't sell any and I was only able to give it to my coach's family and his grandkids and so on and so forth, and it would have been worth it for me. But it took on a life of its own. And that phrase, it took on a life of its own, beyond your imagination of what you could have even expected. This book then went on to become a movie and sell many more copies than you could have thought and win awards. Like when you are innovating for the next thing, when you are focusing on the next step, like even when it came to you writing your children's book, Rudy Kangaroo, like what does creating goals look like for you to the point where you actually start to take action on something? Because I'm sure you have a lot of ideas, but you only take action on a certain few. Like, what does that creative process look like for you?
Well, I am, self-disclosure here. I am one of the most ADD people you'll ever meet. Like I was diagnosed ADHD as a kid, struggled with paying attention in high school. So I think I've always had some entrepreneurial ADD, which is why, I don't just do one thing. I would be bored out of my mind if I just, was, quote, just an author. All I did was write. I need to have my hands in different things. I find it energizing. I also find it stimulates my creative juices. One project can kind of morph into something else. A clothing brand morphed into a radio station as a result of that. And I don't remember the source of this. It might have been one of the guys on Shark Tank, but it was an entrepreneur who was like an angel investor. And he said that, for every 10 things he invests in, 9 of them are complete failures. But the 10th one is usually so successful that it more than makes up, in some cases exponentially makes up for those 9 failures or 9 like financial losses. And I don't think you need to be like a Mark Cuban level entrepreneur for that to relate to you. Like, I think that relates to all of us and everything we do. You might be a CEO who rolls out over the course of a few years 10 different initiatives. You might launch 10 different products. One of them is going to hit huge. The other 9, maybe not so much. But, I think that you have to generate a lot of ideas. You have to generate a lot of different concepts in order. It's a game of, I think, finding great ideas is a game of quantity first and then quality second. So the process I use, and I actually created a book. It's called the Idea Journal. But, the process I use is I write down 10 ideas every day. It could be 10 completely different things. It could be 10, very related things like 10 book titles for my next book or whatever it is. And I do that every day. I really think, there's like you had mentioned earlier, there's a muscle memory quality to leadership and leading yourself. I think there's a muscle memory quality to innovation and idea generation. You've got to flex that idea muscle every day. It's use it or lose it. It's going to atrophy. So I force myself to do that. And then at the end of the week, I have a rating system where I rate the viability of those ideas.
Wow.
And, so 10 times 7 is 70. Hopefully I'm getting 70 ideas. Maybe 1, 2 at best are going to be really viable.
Mm-hmm.
That you start to implement. And I think that, I just kind of look at things like this as like an experiment. And, so often leaders, and we talk about being better on this broadcast, leaders want to create change. Well, one of the biggest fears people have is the fear of change. So instead of launching an initiative as, quote, change, we're going to change this, launch it as an experiment. People aren't afraid of experiments. Launch it as an experiment and then kind of iterate that experiment. And if you need to, if it's not working, you scrap it. But people don't fear experiments. They fear change. So why are we labeling this, this sweeping action that we think we need to take as change?